All right, let's talk about tips for fishing the Carolina rig. First of all, when you're rigging it, yeah, you know, some guys will put a bead in front of the swivel, and that protects the knot. So some guys don't. I like to put a bead in front of the swivel. I like the bead, I like to have it a glass bead. Makes a lot more noise. So that's a quick little tip. As far as leader length, typically 2-foot leader is good. The rule of thumb is the tougher the bite, the longer the leader, and you can go up to 4-foot length or 5-foot. I fished up to 5-foot. Weight, a ½ ounce is the typical weight. The only time I go heavier is if I'm fishing a heavier cover or if I'm fishing deeper. Okay, so those are the basics. Let's talk about the more advanced stuff. So you want to heavy up when you're using heavier weights and fishing deeper and bigger baits. For that, I'm using a longer rod, like a 7'6" heavy power rod with braided line with fluorocarbon leader. That's where I'm fishing like weedy areas because that braid will cut through the weeds a lot better. And so you're using a heavier rod for that. And you're using, you know, about 30 to 50 pound braided line, and your leader is going to be 15 pound leader, fluorocarbon leader, usually with a 3/0 extra wide gap hook on the back with, say, a lizard or something like a 6-inch lizard, 7-inch, a larger bait. So the heavier, stouter gear is what you need. The gear ratio on the reel doesn't really matter too much because you're dragging it for the most part. So you're not incorporating any speed with the gear ratio or with reeling it. It's really just when you run a reel back up and cast again. If you want to do that quicker, you can use a higher ratio reel. But there's a little thing here, guys. That's the typical Carolina rig. A lot of people don't realize you can do it, downsize it and make it almost a finesse tactic. No, it's not the split shot. The big difference between a split shot and a smaller version of the Carolina rig is that the line slides through the weight. So when the bass picks it up, they don't feel that resistance from the weight. Whereas when you're using a split shot, that weight's attached to the line at a fixed position. So when the bass picks it up, they immediately feel the weight. So you can use this to your advantage when you're doing finesse tactics because you are now sliding the line through there. It's a light pickup. The fish doesn't feel that resistance. So here you're downsizing. You're using maybe 15-pound line, or might even go down to a spinning tackle and using 10-pound line or 8-pound line. You're again got the swivel. You've got a smaller size. Now you're using like a 3/16, an 1/8 ounce up to a 1/4 ounce weight. You're using a lower diameter line or lower pound line for the leader. So if, say for example, you're using 12 pound for your main line, you're using 8 pound for your leader, and smaller finesse baits. And you can work that around, you know, any depth. And I've been known to be Carolina rigging using a spinning outfit, which a lot of people don't think about that, but it can be very, very effective. So keep that in mind. Let's talk real quick about baits. When you're using the bigger setup, the heavier setup, you're using bigger baits like a 6-inch lizard, full-size Senko, you're using 7-inch worms or other creature baits. That's perfect. They work really, really well there. But when you're downsizing, like with that smaller finesse type Carolina rig, here you're using 4-inch lizards or maybe a 3 or 4-inch Senko on the back, perhaps a tube. A tube can be really good in this situation. Just kind of keep that in mind. You can size up or size down your baits depending on the type of rig and the cover and how deep you're fishing. And you can fish it shallow too, by the way. A lot of guys think Carolina rigging is only for deep. You can fish them shallow. So that really expands your bait choices. Keep in mind your hook selection. Sure, you want the right size hook. So if a larger bait, you're using a 3/0, maybe a 4/0 hook. And if you're using smaller baits, maybe you're using a 2/0 hook. But the key thing here is to use a really light wire hook. Those heavier, like flipping hooks, no, don't use those for Carolina rig, because one of the key things about it is that bait kind of floats and flutters and moves freely behind the weight. And if you've got a heavy gauge wire, it weights it down and it's going to kill that action. It's just going to drag it on the bottom, and it kind of makes the whole point of using a Carolina rig useless. You might as well just be doing a Texas rig or putting on a jig head at that point. So you got to have a light wire hook in order to get that action that you're looking for that's unique to the Carolina rig. Now, how long should the leader be? That's a big question. Well, You know, about 2 foot is kind of a starting point, but the general rule of thumb is the tougher the bite, the longer the leader. So you can go like 4 foot. I fished at 5 foot before, and it works. You know, put a 6-inch lizard on a 5 foot leader with a ½ ounce weight, and you work some ledges and humps, and you know, you maybe be up on 4 or 5 foot of water, but it drops off to 20 foot. Throw it off the deep end and bring it on up on that long leader when the bite's real tough. It can be really deadly. Another key thing to keep in mind though when it comes to leader length is the weeds you're fishing. If you're fishing weeds, you want your bait to be on top of the weeds, not in it. So let's just say the weeds come top off at like 3 feet off the bottom, then your leader length should be 3.5 foot long. So the weight will be on the bottom, but your bait will stay on top of the weeds. So that's a key. Even if the bite's active, they're not going to bite if they can't see it. So you got to keep that in mind too if you're fishing weeds. You got to have the proper leader length so your bait is visible. Let's talk about the technique here. The thing about the Carolina rig is that you're moving it on the bottom and you're bringing the bait to the fish. It's not a drop technique per se. I mean, if you're fishing a ledge or a bluff or maybe some standing timber, yeah, sure. You can throw it out there, give it some slack line, let it fall vertically along that piece of structure, and you can get bit that way. But by and large, the way you fish a Carolina rig is you throw past the object. Say there, a bass may be on a stump or on a log, a laydown, or perhaps on a boulder, or maybe along a dock, at the ends of a dock. You cast past that structure or cover, let it fall in slack line. Once it hits the bottom, reel up that slack line, and now you want to take the rod and just kind of pull it to your side and drag the weight along the bottom and let that bait do its thing. It's got the light action. It'll flutter up and come back down. It might dance side to side. That weightless action is killer. And you just kind of bring that up to that piece of cover and bring it by that piece of cover where the bass might be, and that's how you get those bites. Now a bite's going to be a little weird. A bite is not going to, typically it's not that tap tap hard bite that you normally get. Instead, the bite is a lot of times the rod just loads up as you're moving it to the side. You're just feeling, you got that resistance. And I tell you what, sometimes when you're first starting out, you get resistance on a lot of things, right? There's going to be rocks, there's going to be some sticks or logs or the debris on the bottom, weeds, that's going to feel like something's pulling back on it. And set the hook if you're not sure. I mean, swings are free. But after a while, you'll begin to learn, like, okay, I know I'm fishing open water. There's not a whole lot of weeds, and you get this spongy feeling. It's like this give. Well, rocks don't give. It's solid. So if you pull up in something, you got this, it just feels heavy, and it's kind of like a rubber band. You put a rubber band on your fingers and you stretch it back and forth. You feel that tension, and kind of that give. That's your characteristic Carolina rig bite. Say that fast. Characteristic Carolina rig bite. So when it loads up like that, then set the hook. And when you set the hook, think about it now. First of all, a lot of guys, we set it up over our heads, right? Well, the line comes down, you got the weight, and then the line comes up a little bit more and you've got the rig, or even the bait. And even if the bait's on the bottom, it'll be flat. And so when you set the hook, you actually lift up the weight and you've got to reel up some slack before you make that connectivity between, a straight connection between the bait and your rod. So when you lift up on it, all you're really doing is lifting up on the weight. You're not getting a good hook set. So the way to set the hook with a Carolina rig is to pull it to the side. It's a sweep hook while you twist at the same time. The reason why you do that is because you can get a lot more movement, you move a lot more line, you can move your body into it. Plus, if you're using a 7'6" rod, it moves a lot of line too. And you reel into it while you do it. That speed and power, that's what drives the hook home. And that's how you get a proper hook set on a Carolina rig. Now, as for baits, those 6-inch lizards are like the standard staple of all Carolina rigging, and there's a good reason why. It works really well, so make sure you've got those. But you can expand your horizons. You can use 7-inch worms. You can use craws on the back. How about a weightless fluke? Yeah, a weightless fluke on the back of your Carolina rig. If you're fishing the lighter rigs, you can use that tube. You can use a little crawdad in the back, a reaper, or even a grub works really well. And nowadays, you can get baits that float. They're made by elastic or other types of formulas, what makes the bait more buoyant and floats off the bottom, and that allows it to dart and move around differently than it would if it was dragged on the bottom. That gives you an added amount of action. Or you can add it to the bait. So for example, with a tube, I like to put a little Corky in there from Yakima Baits, like a size 10 or size 14 or so, depending on the size of the bait. And that enables it to float up off the bottom. And you got a tube bait that kind of looks like a bait fish floating off the bottom, and it has more visibility, and it just swirls around and moves erratically as you're moving that Carolina rig around. You can get a lot more bites. So think out of the box, and there's a lot of different baits that you can use depending on if you're using the heavy or the lighter version. You can use larger or smaller baits for depending on the bite's really good, or if it's a light finesse bait that you need to be using that day. As for weight, yeah, the egg sinker works well, so does the bullet sinker. Tungsten works a little bit better. I can get more sensitivity with it, but really it's about what size of weight. Like, that's the big question, right? So the general rule of thumb is use less than a ½ ounce weight if you're fishing less than 15 foot, and if you're going 15 or 20 foot or more, then fish a ¾ ounce weight or heavier. The general rule of thumb here is you really want to maintain contact with it and feel the bottom so you can feel that bite. Here's the extra bonus tip for you guys. So a lot of times in the summertime, a lot of guys fish shallow, they fish top water for good reason. That's where all the action is. You can catch a bunch of fish in a hurry in the early morning hours. Take a Carolina rig and go out deep instead. Fish 20 foot, 30 foot, 40 foot deep. Fishing ridges, humps, other kind of structure that's out there in the early morning hours, and everybody's up fishing shallow. Those big girls typically aren't up shallow. You might catch some good ones fishing topwater in the morning. I'm not saying that they don't bite, but a lot of the big girls, they've moved up from their deeper haunts during the summertime up into those ridges and ledges and humps and long tapering points in 20 foot or deeper. And during those early morning hours, they're not within access of a topwater. You go with a Carolina rig in that deeper water and you can catch some serious hefty bass. When all the other guys, it's hard not to do it because you want to catch topwater's a blast. Who doesn't like a good topwater bite? But I'm telling you, if you really want to go after trophy bass, using a Carolina rig deep in the early morning hours can be a really good way to catch those big ones. So with all those tips in mind, now you're going to go out and do really well with a Carolina rig. I hope that helps. For more tips and tricks like this, visit bassresource.com.